Hi, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Sue, and today we're going to make a wonderful, flavorful, very spicy beef stew called Stifado. And for this recipe, and all the recipes that we've used on this show, please be sure to check out our website, Tweeton.com. You'll find the recipes. You'll find an opportunity to order tapes so you can follow along and cook along with me. You'll find my email address, and I love hearing from you. It's really fun to go to my computer and discover that someone who's been watching this show is emailing me. I love to hear your comments, so be sure to look up our website, and you'll find other links to other Greek sites where you'll find interesting information about Greek culture, more recipes, just all kinds of fun things for Greeks. So today we're going to do Stifado. It's a special and unique stew, different from probably anything else you've encountered, but it's really good. So let's get started. Like any stew, Stifado begins with some good quality meat. You need at least 2 pounds of either lean beef or lean veal. This is a stew that is traditionally made with either beef or veal. So really, lamb is not a substitute here. Beef or veal, very lean cuts. Something that does make Stifado interesting and different from regular stews is that it calls for lots of pearl onions, small boiling onions, anywhere from 1 to 2 pounds. Now you can kind of cheat and do what I did and get them frozen in your frozen food section of your grocery store, or you can actually buy them in your produce section and then peel them and get them ready for the stew. This stew also requires tomato paste, not tomato sauce, but tomato paste. Now the next few ingredients I'm going to show you are the things that make Stifado different. It doesn't have any herbs in it. It's a spice stew, and it has a unique blend of spices. It needs some dark red wine, and the thing that really makes it different, it needs some red wine vinegar. Yes, that's right, red wine vinegar. Of course, you always have to have a little garlic. Now, these are the spices that make Stifado so unique. The vinegar combined with cinnamon, cloves, allspice, bay leaf, and in this case, pepper is not just an add-on, it's a major ingredient. These spices, pepper, bay leaves, allspice, cloves, cinnamon, you have to have them in conjunction with the vinegar, and that's what makes Stifado different. It's very spicy, very tasty. It's a unique flavor experience. And of course, some olive oil for the browning of the meat. The first step, as in almost every stew, is to get the beef browned. So the first thing I'm going to do is heat up my pan. And I do want to get it quite hot because I want the beef to brown and brown immediately. I don't want it to steam or kind of simmer. And I also want to make sure that I'm browning the beef in small batches. If I throw everything into the pot at the same time, what will happen is the moisture from the beef will come out and it'll just steam. It won't really brown. One little extra step I took is that I took the beef out and I just laid it on some paper towels. That way the paper towels absorbed any of the excess moisture that might have come out while the beef stew was waiting in the butcher section of the grocery store, waiting for me to come and buy it. So now my pan is hot. I'm going to add the oil and wait again a few moments because I want to make sure that the oil itself is hot. I don't want anything to be cool or lukewarm because I really want that beef to brown quickly. That was about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. The oil is hot, so in goes the beef. And you can probably hear it sizzling. And the beef should be cut up into chunks, about 1 inch, 1.5 inch chunks. It should not be big chunks. I just put in enough to make one nice layer at the bottom of the pan. I'm not going to overcrowd it again because I want the beef to brown and brown well. I'm going to leave it alone on one side. Make sure at least one side gets really brown, and then I'll start stirring it up. And you can hear it sizzling and it splatters. So be sure, if you've got some nice clothes, be sure you're wearing an apron to protect yourself from the, protect your clothes from the splattering oil. And this is actually the hardest part of this stew. The biggest problem most people have when they're browning anything is that they are tempted to just stir, stir, stir. Well, if you do that, nothing's going to get browned. It'll get cooked, but it won't get browned. To brown something, you need to actually just leave things on one side for a while and just resist the temptation to get in there and stir around. So that's what you need to do with this stew. Just leave things alone for a while, let it brown well on one side, give it a stir, then leave it alone, let it brown again, give it a stir, so on and so forth until everything's pretty well browned. And then you want to remove the stew to a bowl so that you can continue browning the other meat. This batch is pretty good, so I'm going to spoon it out, set it aside. Now remember, the beef does not have to be cooked. All I'm doing is browning it at this point. And in will go another layer of raw beef to be browned. And of course, remember, when you're all done handling the raw beef, be sure to wash your hands carefully. All my stew meat is nicely browned, so I'm just going to remove it all, set it aside in this bowl for a few minutes, and I'll get started on the onions. Today, I'm using these wonderful frozen petite whole onions, pearl onions. I love them because all the hard work is done for me. I don't have to try and peel them. I don't have to do anything except just plop them in the stew. However, if you wanted to, you could get fresh baby pearl onions in the produce section of your grocery store. You'd have to be sure to peel them, and then usually you need to find the root end and put just a little X with a knife tip at the bottom so that they would cook all the way through evenly. Peeling baby onions is a little difficult, so you need to kind of drop them into boiling water for a few minutes, then remove them, and then the peels will come off easier. That's why I go with the frozen ones. The next step is to brown the pearl onions. Just brown them lightly in the same pan in which you browned the beef stew meat. In they go. Again, you're not cooking these. You're just browning them, getting a little caramelization. You'll notice that these frozen packages of pearl onions are about 10 ounces each. So to make a good stew, you'll need 2 of these packages, 20 ounces. If you're using fresh pearl onions, you'll need anywhere from 1 pound to 2 pounds. Now, 2 pounds would make it more Greek. 1 pound will make it okay. But I would try and get somewhere between 1 and 2 pounds of pearl onions. So this isn't a long, involved step, and you don't need to make sure that they're all cooked, anything like that. All right, leave them on the high heat for a few moments. Stir them up, leave them, stir them up, that kind of thing. And when it looks like they've changed color a little bit, then just set them aside in another bowl. These onions are pretty good right now. They're slightly brown, they've gotten a little caramelized, and that's all I'm looking for. So I'm going to spoon them out and set them aside while I work on the rest of the stew. I think I'll turn off the heat too. Now, Stifado you will find at many Greek restaurants, and you'll also find it at most Greek festivals because it's one of those foods that can be made ahead of time and it can be kept warm for a long time. It keeps very well and it tastes good no matter what stage you're eating it at, whether it's fresh, immediately fresh, right out of the pot, or whether it's stayed a day in the refrigerator or just a few hours. It's wonderful. Now, Stifado needs garlic. And to go along with the spiciness, the more garlic, the better. 2 cloves up to 4 cloves. And you know me, it's going to be 4 cloves and 4 big cloves. So here we go. This is a pathetic clove. I'm going to have to get some more bigger ones. That's a little better. All right, I've got 4 cloves of garlic, and I'm going to use this handy dandy thing my mother got me to get rid of the garlic peel. And it really does work. And see how the peel just comes away very easily. This is great. Great little gadget. Now all I need to do is just finely mince the garlic. Or you could run it through a garlic press. That would work too. Probably be a little easier. And I'm just going to put this garlic into the pot. It does not really need to be browned beforehand. Now it's just a matter of adding all the flavorings. To the pot, I put in those 4 cloves of garlic. Now I want to add approximately half a cup of red wine. This isn't exact, but it's close enough for me. One of the little bottles. Dark red, heavy-bodied, full-bodied red wine. Okay, that smells pretty good. Now, the thing that makes Stifado really different, red wine vinegar, 1/4 cup. I've seen recipes that range from the addition of 1 tablespoon of vinegar to up to a cup of vinegar, but mine just calls for 1/4 cup. Stifado will be reminiscent of German Sauerbraten, and that it has that little vinegar aftertaste. So 1/4 cup of red wine vinegar, and then some of the spices. Some ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon. Some ground cloves. Yeah, this stuff is spicy. Some ground allspice, 1/4 teaspoon. You could also use whole cloves, whole allspice, and cinnamon sticks for an interesting variation. You just need to wrap them up in cheesecloth tie them up because you don't want all this stuff floating around. Now you need at least 2 bay leaves. And a generous amount of freshly ground pepper, at least a teaspoon. This is one place where you're not going to skimp on pepper because it's part of this spice mixture. In fact, there are some recipes for Stifado that call not for the ground spices at all, but 1 to 2 tablespoons of pickling spices wrapped up in a cheesecloth bag. You need to add at least 1 teaspoon of salt. Just taste it later in case you need additional salt. So 1 teaspoon salt. And to all this, you need 1 6-ounce can of tomato paste. Just mix all this up. Stifado is not like traditional Greek stews, and that it's not going to be very, very juicy. It's different. So there's not going to be as much broth or water as, say, one of the stews that features vegetables, features green vegetables. Now I'm just going to plop the ground beef into my pot that has all those flavorings and seasonings. And I am going to add some water, either water or broth, anywhere from 1.5 to 2 cups. I'll check this after it's all been cooking, and if it needs more water or broth, I can add some later, but I don't want to overdo it. So about 1.5 to 2 cups, and I'm going to, even though I have 2 cups measured here, I'm just going to stick with 1.5 because I don't want to have it swimming. Now I'm just using water, but for added boost to flavor, I'm going to just add 1 bouillon cube, 1 beef bouillon cube. You could use beef broth, or you can just use water by itself. All I want to do now is just mix up the ingredients, and this is ready to go on to the stove and to cook. I put my stew on the stove. I'm turning up the heat high. I want to bring it up to a simmer, then I'll turn it down, and I want it to simmer for at least an hour until the beef is just tender. The stew's been cooking for an hour, so I want to check it to make sure that the beef is just tender. And it smells so good, so very spicy. I'm going to take a couple chunks, and just poke them. All right. I just want to make sure that the meat is getting cooked. I don't want to add the onions until the meat is just about cooked all the way through. Otherwise, the onions will cook and the meat will still be hard. And then I'll have to keep cooking and cooking, and the whole thing will turn to mush. But this meat looks just fine. And look at that rich, rich, spicy sauce. Very fragrant. Now all I want to do is just add the pearl onions that I browned earlier. Put them all in there. Stir it up, and then cook this mixture for another half hour. At the end of the half hour, I'll just check, make sure the meat's completely tender and cooked, and that the onions are cooked. And I'm not going to add any more water. This is good enough for me. because as I have said, Stifado is not a super juicy stew. So, put the cover on, leave it alone for a half hour, and I'll come back and check everything. Spring has sprung, and my pots of herbs and my garden full of herbs, they're just growing wild now. And so I have to go out very frequently and harvest them. And here is some Greek oregano that I just cut and harvested yesterday. And what I'm doing is just I've washed it very, very carefully, several times. Make sure there's no dirt, no little bugs, nothing. And all I'm doing is just taking them, putting it together like this. And I can either use string or I'm using a twisty to tie the ends together. Now, one thing I could do, if I had room in the kitchen or somewhere else, I could hang them like this and they would air dry. That's one thing. Or I can lay it on something like this, a very airy rack that allows a lot of airflow, and just leave it like this. One day on this side, then turn it over another day on this side, and in a few days, the Greek oregano would be dried, and then I can just crumble it up and put it in a jar for use. Now I want you to look at, this is the bounty from my garden already. Here I have some wonderfully dried rosemary. Here is some of that wonderful mint. And just a word of caution, if you're going to grow mint in your yard, don't stick it in the ground. Keep it in a pot. Mint is invasive. It'll take over the entire world. Here I have a harvest of sage leaves. And then right here, more Greek oregano. Now, I know it looks like I have a whole lot, and I will have a whole lot when I crumble it up. But the thing is, I use a whole lot. So it's fun. It's really fun for me to grow the herbs, then to harvest them, and to dry them, and to know that I'll have wonderfully fragrant Greek oregano, dried Greek oregano, rosemary, sage, and mint all winter long. It's been 30 minutes, and I checked. The beef is perfectly done, and the onions are done too. So I'm just going to take this off the heat and get ready to serve it. That looks good. Stifado is like any kind of stew. You can make it early in the morning, cool it, and then reheat it right before serving. You can make it up to 1-2 days ahead of time. It'll only taste better. And of course, you can do what I'm doing right here. You can serve it immediately. Doesn't that look good? It is so different, very different from normal Greek fare because it is so spicy. But you have nice big chunks of beef, those wonderful little pearl onions, and a delicious, delicious spicy sauce. It can be served with lots of bread. This is one dish that you could serve with plain rice pilaf, buttered noodles. So why don't you try this? This is something that's really easy to make, especially with the frozen pearl onions. It's easy to make. It can be made ahead of time, but it's a spectacular presentation. Very delicious. You like that? Kind of different, huh?